The APBA Baseball Master Game is big. I mean, this thing takes up my whole kitchen table. I think this game has a bigger footprint than any other tabletop baseball sim in history. Now, I know that the modern version is better designed. They sell it in a booklet instead of with the huge boards, but the game today is just as complex as it's always been, and that complexity is not necessarily a good thing. To understand the Master Game, though, we really have to go back to the gaming world of the 1970s. As you already know, Stratomatic made a huge splash back in 1972. That's when the Stratomatic Advanced game was first released. The Advanced game included platoon ratings for every single player. It also included power hitting ratings, and there were also arm ratings for outfielders to make for better and more realistic base running. APBA didn't have any of those things, and J. Richard Seitz, who was running APBA, was probably worried about his game falling behind the competition. We don't know the exact numbers, and we do know that APBA's sales continued to increase as the 70s rolled along, but we also know that Strat quickly became a major competitor, and a lot of that was because of the platoon system. APBA's initial response was to downplay the lefty-righty system, like it did in this frequently asked questions document, which I think comes from 1975. This Fritz Light article from the August 1972 APBA Journal provides some more insight into APBA's thinking at the time. Light called the platooning ratings a sales gimmick that would detract from the realism of the game, which are pretty strong words. That was a pretty bold strategy when you think about it. Again, we don't know the exact numbers, but it seems clear in hindsight that APBA was actually losing market share to Stratomatic. What Light said in that article wasn't really that far away from blaming the consumer for wanting the wrong thing. The pushback was swift and pretty severe. One thing is for sure, customers of APBA were not going to let the company just wave its hands and ignore the lefty-righty splits. Another thing you have to keep in mind is that there were a large number of people who had played both APBA and Stratomatic by this time. That tends to be overlooked, but it's obvious when you read the fan publications. You see the same names in both publications all the time. Anyway, while this was going on, APBA had been constantly teasing the existence of something called the Master Game, which was allegedly something so complex and so realistic that the average APBA consumer just couldn't handle it, which of course got the APBA community really excited. Now, I'm not quite sure where the Master Game was first hinted at. It certainly wasn't in 40 Years of APBA, a 1972 pamphlet that served as free advertising for the game company. From what I've found, the very first mentions of a new game seem to be this teaser from the October 1972 issue of the APBA Journal. Now, this June 1973 letter to the editor in the APBA Journal mentions a claim on APBA's brochure that the original APBA baseball game was actually much more complicated than the game that was released. That seems to be a reference to this part of the APBA brochure from the mid-1970s. This particular one comes from 1975. But it's not clear to me how long that specific language was in the APBA brochure. Unfortunately, we don't have a whole ton of scans of the old brochures. In other words, it's not clear to me that Seitz was actually advertising a Master Game before Stratomatic's Advanced game was released. Anyway, as the months went by, the demand for the Master Game only grew, as well as the speculation over what might be included. In this June 1975 interview, Seitz almost hits against the release of a Master Game, noting that the old-time players kept playing the original game even after mastering it. And then, at the 1975 APBA convention, the announcement of the coming Master Game was first made, and that really got the speculation going. The early hype for this game was amazing. It was going to include 25 pitching grades, platoon factors, gopher pitches, batted against average, stealing options, the choice of which base to throw to, and on and on. And so the big minds of APBA busied themselves with speculation about what the fabulous Master Game might include. The biggest problem with hype like this, of course, is that you've actually got to live up to it. And if the hype is big enough, people will start to expect that you will do something you can't actually do. Honestly, I think that's where APBA really got itself into trouble, but let me show you. Okay, this is the original edition of the fabled APBA Master Game. It comes with a ton of different boards, far more than any of APBA's other games at the time. Famously, it also came with the 1951 Brooklyn Dodgers and New York Giants, marking the first time APBA had ever reprinted teams from the so-called APBA era. That's another topic for another day. The subject of potential reprints was hugely controversial in APBA circles throughout the 1970s, also in Stratomatic, by the way. I believe that sites deliberately decided to include those two teams with the Master Game as a teaser for the gamers who were begging for the extremely scarce 1950 seasons to be reprinted. So if you look at, say, this Willie Mays card, you'll notice a few things are different. The play result numbers are basically the same as on any other APBA card, sure. But then you've got these extra things at the top, an SA rating and 2 F ratings, including 1 in parentheses. And you've also got this extra rating next to his normal fielding rating. That's the stuff that the Master Game added in, more ratings and more complexity. It's not necessarily all that hard to understand, but we do need to go through this step by step. The first rating here, SA1, is a code. SA means he hits straight away. He doesn't pull the ball, in other words. As you can see here on some of the play results, those codes change the field where the ball is hit. PL means it's a hitter who pulls it to left field. PR means it's a hitter who pulls it to right. SA means he doesn't have a tendency to pull it to either field. Now, this 1 impacts the pitchers who face him, so let's take a look at a pitcher. Here's the card for Don Newcomb. Notice that he does not have a letter grade. Instead, he's got this 11 in parentheses. The Master Game replaced the old APBA pitching grades with a series of 30 different pitching grades, as you can see from this bases empty pitching chart. And per the rules, if the batter hits from the same side the pitcher throws from, the pitcher gets a slight bump in his grade. Mays was a right-handed hitter. Newcomb was a right-handed pitcher. And so the SA1 on Mays' card means that Newcomb gets an additional grade bump when he pitches against Mays. That means that Newcomb would be a 12, not an 11, for this particular at-bat. And that's the lefty-righty system. Seriously, that's the whole system. The original version of the game limited batters to numbers between 0 and 5. However, at some point in the 1990s, the system changed to allow for larger numbers. The new system also allowed batters to impact pitchers from both sides of the plate, either negatively or positively. But at the same time, you've got to keep in mind that this only impacted play results that the pitcher actually had something to do with, basically anything that was a base hit. There's a question right away as to whether a system that complex was really necessary. It's not easy to remember, obviously. A negative number for a batter means that you add to a pitcher's grade. A positive number means you subtract from it. Now that's pretty hard to remember for what amounts to be a minor difference in most cases. And if you think that was bad, just wait. The stolen base system is so complex that it doesn't fit on a single chart. Part of this is because of APBA's insistence on including options for dropped throws and wild throws, which of course are extremely rare. So let's say you've got Jackie Robinson on first base. This D29 right here is his stolen base rating. The 29 is his steal success rating. Meanwhile, this D is called his steal allowance rating. So you start off by looking at the steal allowance chart. Here's the column for letter D. Jackie can steal second base only with 1 or 2 out and behind by 1 run, tied, or ahead by 1 run. However, if it's after the 6th inning, he can steal with nobody out, or he can steal if the Dodgers are ahead by any number of runs. If you look at the whole chart, you'll see a lot of arbitrary decisions like that. I'm not sure how J. Richard Seitz came to these particular conclusions. So the theory here is good. You want to make sure that guys who have 100% success rates can still steal bases, right? But the problem is that these are artificial constraints that are hard to remember. I have no idea why you would make it so that Jackie can only steal second base every other Thursday when there's a full moon or whatever it is. Okay, like I said, that 29 is Jackie's chance of success. It means he has 29 out of 36 chances to steal successfully. To see if he stole the base or not, you consult this handy chart to convert those chances to APBA rolls. 29 is located under 55. That means any roll of 55 or lower means that he's got the base stolen. But of course, it's not that simple. It's never that simple. Let's pretend that the pitcher is Larry Jansen. Jansen has this MF rating. It stands for move to first, not what you think. The 1 next to the MF means that his move to first takes 1 away from Robinson's ability to steal. Now you've also got to look at the catcher's card. In this case, it's Wes Westrum. Westrum has a TH rating of +2, which means it takes 2 points away from Robinson's ability to steal. So Robinson's 29 is subtracted by 1 and then by 2, giving him a total of 26. And so that's the number you look up under the chart when you roll the dice. And you subtract more if he's stealing third, and then a lot more if he's stealing home. Plus, you have to see if the letter lets him steal that base. And then he gets 2 extra points if he's on first base and the defense isn't holding him on for some reason. Yeah, it's a complex game, and it's kind of a mess at that. There's a lot of the nickel and dime changing left and right to add 2 points here or subtract 2 points there. There's a lot of work for not much payoff. The base runner advancement system operates under the same theory, but is even more of a headache, so get ready for this one. Okay, let's say that Robinson is on second base. Gil Hodges is batting. Let's say that Gil rolls a 51 for a 9. Say that Larry Jansen is the opposing pitcher. He's got a 14. Jansen is right-handed. Hodges is also right-handed, and so we add 2 to Jansen's grade. You see what I mean by cumbersome? Anyway, let's keep going. Jansen is a 16 now, which means he can't stop the 9 with a runner on second base. And the result is this mess of numbers and letters. Okay, let's go through this slowly and break it down so we can figure out what's going on. The first thing we need to figure out is if the ball was pulled to right field or not. That's what this PR means. Hodges has a PL rating, so we don't worry about the PR result. Now we've got 2 numbers here, a 41 and a 51 with an asterisk next to it. These numbers are called the hit location numbers. The asterisk means it's got a location of 51 if there are 2 men out. Let's pretend that there's only 1 man out, so it's a 41. Now the runner, Jackie Robinson, will advance to third base no matter what since it's a single, but we can use the chart to see if he has a chance of going home. Now Monty Irvin is playing left field for the Giants. This number in parentheses is his arm rating. We take that number, 33, and subtract Robinson's base running number from it. That's this F19 right here. And yeah, there are different numbers for stealing bases and for base runner advancement. It's kind of a mess, just like I told you. Anyway, 33 minus 19 is 14, right? We then take the number 41 and subtract 14 from it, which gives us 27. And now we look at the chart. That's the same one we saw before, but with a third column. If we roll a 53 or less, Robinson is safe at the plate. Pretty complex, isn't it? And it gets worse from there. This other result on the boards comes into play if the batter tries for second and the ball is cut off to nab him. Similarly, the third column of results comes into play when you've got the 2 runners on base and the defense wants to throw out the trailing runner. All of that is pretty complicated. I'm not going to go too deep into that in this video. Just know that there are ways to do things like that in this game, though they all require a bit of algebra and some messing around with numbers. Remember too that the hit valuation number with 2 men out was a 51, not a 41. Robinson would have had 37 chances to score if that were the case. That means he'd score over 100% of the time, which means that there's no need to roll the dice. And that system also applies to fly balls. Every fly ball with a runner on base also has an advancement rating, even with a runner on first. When you start seriously playing the Master Game, you get to the point where you can do all of these calculations up in your head. However, you also find yourself being way too conservative on the base paths. Usually, I don't try for another base unless I've got at least a 24 after doing all the math, or 2 out of 3 chances to make it. And the problem then is that you don't get enough guys thrown out on the base paths. There are other complexities too, like this fielding column finder chart. Anytime you've got any sort of non-hit result, you'll wind up with a fielder who might impact that result. The boards tell you in this column who to look up. So you take the fielder rating, you go to the chart, you roll the dice, and you see what fielding column they're part of. This is nice because it gives you some variety, and it's kind of similar to Stratomatic's old fielding system. However, it's also a pain because it means you get to roll the dice over and over again just to figure out what happened for like a routine ground ball. If you look closely at the play results, you'll see that sacrifices and hit and run results are listed on the same playing board. That is pretty nice, though it's another reason why those old boards were so monstrously large. If you look at the pitching charts carefully, you'll notice a couple of odd letters. G and H refer to home run letters on pitcher cards that turn home runs into doubles. M and L refer to letters that turn doubles into home runs. Additionally, you'll notice that some extra base hits become singles against certain pitcher grades. Some of these decisions seem random. For example, with a runner on second base, play result 10 against a pitcher with a grade 29 is a base hit. However, a grade 7 pitcher would turn a 10 into a 26 or a potential double play. Yeah, it's kind of strange. There's a bit of randomness and some gamification thrown into the game, I guess, to keep the players honest. Anyway, that is nothing compared to the rare play system. Okay, let's look at Jackie Robinson's card again. You probably remember from my earlier videos that player result numbers 36 through 40 were unusual results going back to National Pastime. That's like this 36 Robinson has on 46. With the bases empty, 36 through 41 takes us to the rare play boards. When we get there, we have to roll the dice again and consult this chart to see what results we get. Notice that not all of the numbers will give you all possible results. Notice as well that most results are 28, 29, and 30, so many that I can't really highlight them all for you. With the bases empty, the problem is that 28, 29, and 30 wind up being balls, strikes, or foul balls. Again, look at how many 28s, 29s, and 30s you get from this chart. The rare play chart is actually a great idea, but not like this. I mean, it's really frustrating to roll the dice, you get the rare play result, you roll the dice again, and you wind up with a foul ball and wishing that you had forgotten about the whole thing. Now, you can find some fun results on the rare play chart. For example, here's one for fan interference, and here is the extremely rare unassisted triple play. And here you've got a runner thrown out for missing the bag. But another part of the problem is that the really fun rare play results don't tend to come up unless you're really lucky because of how these charts are designed. Anyway, there's a couple of other things I'll go over really quickly for you guys. Don Newcomb has this BK0 rating, for example, which means that he will very rarely give up balks. There are play results that are balks unless the pitcher has a BK0, which means you go do something else. He has a WP1 rating, his wild pitch rating, which works basically the same way. Wes Westrom has a PB1 rating for a passed ball rating, and that also works essentially the same way. And that's not all. Then you've got the changes that they made to the game in 1987. Oh boy. APBA revised its game in 1987. You can tell by this 1987 copyright date. Also, the rare play boards are blue in the 1987 version. In the original version, the rare play boards were in red. And I know that the scans that I've been showing you here are not in blue or in red. That's because they come from a scanned version of these boards that a friend of mine put together for me. It makes creating this video just a little bit faster and easier. Now let's look at that 9 result with a runner on second base that we saw before. And as you can see, the whole thing is a massive mess. There are 2 slashes here that Gil Hodges would be presented with after his hit. If we ignore the 2 out results, we get a 38, 41, or a 43. You're supposed to roll 1 die. If you get a 1 or a 2, it's a 38. If you get a 3 or a 4, it's a 41. And if it's a 5 or a 6, it's a 43. And this system also applies to basically anything hit in the air, as you can see down here. In other words, in the new system, you're adding on more randomness and, of course, more dice rolls. And you're doing that to be able to add on maybe 3 or 4 percentage points to the chance of success. I honestly fail to see why. The other big change comes with these Q ratings for pitchers. These ratings are the first and only pitcher fatigue ratings independent of runs allowed that APBA has ever developed. Anyway, I think that basically covers it. It's a complex game that does some things well, but really messes some other things up. But the big question, of course, is whether it's realistic or not. To be blunt, it's not. If you read a lot of old APBA journal issues, you'll come across innovations for the Master Game like this one from 1983. The idea was to use different grades for having the bases empty and for having runners on base. Now, this particular 1908 replay resulted in extremely good-looking pitching stats, as you can see here, but only after making significant changes to the Master Game. In fact, most APBA Master Game replays from the old days required extensive changes to pitching ratings and to the basic rules of the game to be even close to realistic. Also, the APBA computer game was based on the Master Game, but the old version, not the 1987 revised version. This also applies to Baseball for Windows, though there have been a few other internal modifications since. We'll get to those in a future video. Now, in the heyday of the APBA Journal, the editorial staff strongly recommended that people at least regrade every pitcher in their league before starting replays in order to get things right. And this wound up being a major problem for APBA. The Master Game had some good ideas, but it was way too cumbersome for serious solo play. I mean, I can barely fit the stupid thing on my kitchen table, for crying out loud. And the worst part is that advancements in computer technology have made it obvious that the game has some major flaws. So, if you're wondering about things like National Pastime Next Generation or Skeetersoft NP3, you really need to look first at the old APBA Master Game and its failings. Even Replay can be thought of as an alternative to APBA, what we might have had if sites had been a little more creative. Part of the problem, of course, is that sites wanted to make cards that were compatible with both the basic and the master games. Stratomatic had a simple solution: just print on both sides of the cards. APBA, however, insisted on keeping the basic game as the base, which is why there are so many bizarre calculations and workarounds. It seems obvious that APBA cards were designed for the basic game, not the master game. At least they were that way for years. Other than the original 1951 Giants and Dodgers, APBA cards did not contain master symbols on the cards themselves for decades. Instead, you had to buy one of these extra master symbol sheets and figure out how to keep it with your cards. That changed a few years back, thankfully. It was a really bizarre policy that never made any sense to me. Well, there you have it. I know that there have been a few other changes to the most recent version of the Master Game. However, I don't own a copy, nor do I plan on purchasing one. The Master Game is still a very complicated mess, and it tries to do way too many things at once. I'm not sure about how the rest of you feel, but personally I consider this to be one of the biggest disappointments in the history of baseball tabletop gaming.